Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to look at Blue-Red Delver in Legacy. So this has been like solidly the best deck for a really long time, only to be challenged recently by the white-based initiative decks. And this deck tech is mostly to be looking at how this Delver deck is combating the initiative threat, how it's evolving, and frankly remaining probably the best deck in the format, or at least the most consistent deck in the format. So we're going to be looking at the deck, looking at the card choices, explaining the overall strategy of the deck, and then specifically how it is evolving for initiative. Let's do it. So this Blue-Red Delver, the point of the deck is to play extremely cheap threats in a 3-2 flyer for 1 with Delver of Secrets, in a 3-3 flyer for 1 with Dragon's Rage Channeler, and a hopefully 8-8 but sometimes smaller flyer for 2 in Murktide Regent. Now, all of these cards benefit from having a ton of instants and sorceries within your deck, which is the entirety of the rest of the deck. The rest of the deck is based around drawing as many cards as possible, so we draw into our threats and draw into our interaction with Expressive Iteration, Brainstorm, and Ponder. Interacting with our opponent via some of the best counterspells in the format, via Force of Will and Daze. By the way, Mishra's Bauble also goes into the drawing cards category. And then dealing with our opponent's threats, which Snuff Out and Lightning Bolt. And then we kind of run a fun of Reanimate, mostly for this initiative threat. Now, these black cards in Snuff Out and Reanimate is solely for initiative. This is how the deck has evolved as initiative has been good. If you're able to kill an initiative creature or Force of Will an initiative creature, which happens pretty often, being able to reanimate your opponent's initiative creature is extremely powerful. In addition, we really needed some unconditional removal in the matchup, which is why Snuff Out exists. And Snuff Out is pretty solid overall, even in like other creature matchups and like the mirror match and stuff like that. So let's go card for card, look at the lands and whatnot. So we're running Fetch lands, Flooded Strand, Misty Rainforest, Polluted Delta, Scalding Tarn. We're going by 2s just to play around the like corner case of getting a Fetch land Pithing Needled and like us being in a total nightmare. As long as they're blue, we're totally fine because the only basic that we run is Island. The things we fetch out with those things, we have 4 Volcanic Islands, which is obvious, right? We're primarily blue and red. We also are running a Singleton Underground Sea. So that single Underground Sea is for Reanimate. For that fun of, but also is for Snuff Out. Snuff Out, again, is for these creature matchups, but it's really important with initiative running around everywhere, and frankly, the mirror match with Murktide Regent, for us to have unconditional removal. Unholy Heat and Lightning Bolt work quite good enough. So it's a single Underground Sea. And we have Mystic Sanctuary. Mystic Sanctuary is for in the grindy matchups. You go the super late game. You're able to put an instant sorcery from your graveyard on top of your deck. Cool part about Mystic Sanctuary 2 is that is a card being removed from the graveyard, so it triggers Murktide Regent, so it puts another +1/+1 counter on Murktide Regent. Normally you're putting like a removal spell or a draw spell like Expressive Iteration on top of your deck with Mystic Sanctuary. And then we're playing a 4 of Wasteland. Wasteland is a really interesting card. Or being able to take out your opponent's lands really matters in Legacy for a couple of reasons. One, there's so many draw spells in Legacy and very efficient draw spells like Brainstorm and Ponder that a lot of hands are kept in one land, right? When one land hands are kept, you're able to wasteland that one land, and then you can just win the free game by just aggroing them out with Delver and Dragon Rage Channeler. In addition, there's a lot of lands that like do things, like in the mirror match, with this being the innovation for initiative, if you take out your opponent's Underground Sea, it blanks 4 to 5 cards in your opponent's deck. You know, and you get to keep them off colors. Like, Wasteland can lead to a lot of free wins and put you at a really distinct advantage. Playing 2 Mishra's Bauble. Mishra's Bauble is awesome because it's a free card that is an artifact in the graveyard for Dragon's Rage Channeler. You can play a turn 1 Dragon's Rage Channeler and then play Mishra's Bauble and trigger Dragon's Rage Channeler to be able to filter your draws and make it bigger very, very quickly. It puts cards in the graveyard for Murktide Regent super quickly. And again, it's just a free card that lets us filter through our deck because we're not running a lot of lands and we're not running a lot of like different threats. We want to see as many cards as possible. Ponder and Brainstorm sort of go into the same category. You're able to see the top 3 cards of your deck and select them in some way. Ponder is really good alongside Delver. Being able to put instants and sorceries on top of your deck is pretty straightforward to play with. You know, look at the top 3 cards, put them back in any order, then you may shuffle and then draw a card. Brainstorm is a little bit more difficult to play with, and understanding how to play with Brainstorm is a really pivotal part of Legacy. And if you're watching this deck tech, I hope you understand how to work with Brainstorm, but I'll give you like the basics. The basic mode of Brainstorm in Legacy is to do it during your turn draw 3 cards, put 2 cards from your hand that you don't want on top of your deck, and then you play a fetch land and shuffle it away. And that's like really like that's the basics of Brainstorm. Some other neat things you can do with Brainstorm is on your upkeep in response to the Delver trigger, you can Brainstorm and put an instant or sorcery on top of your deck so that you always flip Delver, which is a pretty cool mode of Brainstorm. Another pretty neat mode of Brainstorm is when you're thought seized or griefed, being able to tuck cards and hide them on top of your deck so that they are unable to be discarded from your hand and you know you're going to draw them. That's a pretty cool mode of Brainstorm. Or even as an instant speed, like this thing needs to be Force of Willed. I don't have Force of Will in my hand. Let's see if Force of Will's in the top 3 cards of my deck. And you just Brainstorm during your opponent's turn. Those, I think, are the most common modes of Brainstorm. And you really, it is a very difficult card to play with, like beyond that first mode where you just like draw 3 cards, get rid of 2 of them. So our threat, Delver of Secrets, I mean, it's the deck's namesake. It's 1 mana 1/1, but if during your upkeep you're able to reveal an instant or sorcery on top of your deck, it turns into a 3/2 flyer for 1, which is like insane value, right? Evasion, 3 power for 1 mana, being able to play it on turn 1 is ridiculous, and that's why we play a lot of instants and sorceries, and our deck's kind of centered around that strategy. Another reason why we play all these instants and sorceries, we're playing Dragon's Rage Channeler, which is kind of like Delver Light, maybe even a better Delver in some scenarios, where it's a 1/1 for 1. Whenever we play a non-creature spell, we Surveil 1, where we look at the top card of our deck and can put that in the graveyard or leave it on the top. And when there are 4 different card types in the graveyard, then it becomes a 3/3 flyer that must attack every turn. Now, card types are like creature, instant, sorcery, land, or even artifact, you know, with Mishra's Bauble. And this can happen very, very quickly, sometimes as fast as flipping Delver on the second turn. And the beauty of this card is that you can filter your draw steps, right? You can leave cards on top of your deck that you actually want to draw, as well as being a super, super aggressive card. Unfortunately, Dragon's Rage Channeler, since we're talking about the creatures, is sort of a non-bow with Murktide Regent. You know, you put things in the graveyard, or maybe, I guess it could be considered a combo, but you put things in the graveyard, and then when you exile them with Murktide Regent, you have to be really, really careful when you play Murktide Regent for 2. So that you can leave Dragon's Rage Channeler as a 3/3, or understands Dragon's Rage Channeler may get smaller when you exile things out of your graveyard with Murktide Regent. Then we play 2 of Lightning Bolt. We're filling space. More Lightning Bolt is incredibly efficient removal and can finish our opponent off when we need it to. Playing a 4 of Daze. Anything you can play for free is good in Legacy, right? Anything you can play for free is good in Legacy, right? You return an island to your hand, counter target spell, unless the controller pays 1. A kind of neat mode of this too is being able to return a land to your hand in order to be able to Brainstorm, put it on top if you have like a lot of lands or whatever. A kind of cool mode too is I've totally seen people like have a lot of lands, not want their Underground Sea like wastelanded or something like that, so they like cast a Lightning Bolt at their opponent and then daze their own Lightning Bolt in order to return the Underground Sea to their hand in response to a wasteland. It's kind of a neat mode. I think it's a little high level, but is like a really, really cool thing you can do with Daze. And then we have Expressive Iteration, which is an extremely good card. Look at the top 3 cards. You put 1 at the bottom of your library, put 1 in exile, and put 1 into your hand, and you can play the 1 until exile till end of turn. It's basically like 2 mana draw 3, because oftentimes one of the 3 cards you don't want anyway. The way we want to play this card is, unless we're searching for a very specific card, it's really important, like Force of Will gets in our hand because we're playing against a combo deck, or we're digging for a card specifically, you generally want to play it before a land drop, so you don't really want to turn 2 this card, because what happens is you Expressive Iteration, and you look at the top 3 cards, you put 1 into your hand, then pass the turn very, very often. But if we cast it turn 3, we can put one action card into our hand, exile a land, play the land from exile, and like we've used 2 of the 3 cards, and that's awesome. It's at its best when you play it in the late game and can like exile an action card, do something with that action card, and put like a Force of Will in your hand or something. It is beautiful. It's super, super good. While similar to Brainstorm and Ponder, unlike Ponder, we have access to all 3 of those cards on the turn that we play Expressive Iteration if we want it to. And unlike Brainstorm, there's not a giant drawback other than having to put 1 of those cards away, which normally you want to anyway. I'm playing a 4 of Snuff Out, right? So we normally aren't going to be casting this for 4 mana, but it's instant speed, pay 4 life, destroy a creature, it can't be regenerated. Specifically, destroy a non-black creature, it can't be regenerated. Like I said, this is for the initiative matchup, being able to answer the initiative creatures so we can bang back with Delver, Dragon's Rage Channeler and Murktide Regent is super, super important. It's pretty good in the mirror match, really anything where they're casting creatures and trying to kill you with them. And the 4 life doesn't really matter because often we're the aggressive deck, right? Legacy, except for like elves and like some other smaller like matchups or less likely matchups, Legacy is really centered around like your opponent casting very, very good creatures and a few of them, like the mirror match, like initiative. And if you're able to answer those creatures without being questioned, especially answer those creatures and like not lose tempo, like being able to snuff out, still play our draw spells, still play our Murktide Regent, still play our creatures on that same turn, it is extremely, extremely good. Again, the weakness to this innovation and this strategy and this like free removal is that if they like Wasteland the Underground Sea, or we are unable to grab our Underground Sea because we've got to make sure we have Volcanic Island to cast our other stuff, Snuff Out is a dead card, which, to be fair, dead cards are less bad in this deck than other decks because we can shuffle them away with Ponder, we can put them away with Restoration, and we can tuck them back in our deck with Brainstorm, and we can put them into our graveyard with Dragon's Rage Channeler. Force of Will is kind of a pillar card of Legacy, I think I would say. You can exile a blue card for your hand instead of paying the card's mana cost and pay 1 life. And you get to counter target spell. Being able to have this free, similar to Snuff Out and Daze, being able to have free interaction like Force of Will is an important part of Legacy, right? You can not only make sure that you keep applying pressure and keep making sure you can like are working to kill your opponent, but also like with Force of Will, you can make sure that you don't just die to your opponent's combo, or like you can tap out and it's not a big deal because you can have Force of Will, that important card your opponent plays next turn. And then Murktide Regent is one of the best recent additions to Delver. As Delve, so it's 7 mana with Delve, 2 blue and 5, 3/3. Flying, so Delve, you can exile cards from your graveyard instead of paying a generic mana. Enters the battlefield with +1/+1 encounters equal to each instant and sorcery card exiled with it, and whenever an instant or sorcery card leaves your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Murktide Regent. So there's a possibility of this being a 2-mana 8/8 pretty early in the game. Very often it's not. Very often it sits around like a 2-mana 6/6 flyer, which is still actually unreal and totally insane, especially with all of these cards we're putting into our graveyard. Everything is super, super cheap. We put things in our graveyard with Dragon's Rage Channeler, right? Mishra's Bauble. Even these fetch lands are going into our graveyard very, very quickly. Wasteland's going into our graveyard really quickly. We can cast Murktide Regent very early in the game, and even if it ends up just being a 2-mana 3/3, which it almost never does, it's still fine. And like I said, it's normally like a 2-mana 6/6. But like I said, you need to make sure that you are very careful with Murktide Regent in regards to Dragon's Rage Channeler to make sure that you can still apply pressure. Look at the sideboard. Counterbalance. Counterbalance is a really cool card that we can bring in enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you can reveal the top card of your library. If you do counter that spell, if it has the same mana value as the revealed card, we want to bring this card in against other decks with a lot of 1-mana spells, because most of our deck is 1-mana spells. We want to bring it in against decks that like it's a reasonable chance for us to blind flip a 1-mana spell off the top of our deck and just get a free counter. So this is like the mirror match. It's reasonable against Reanimator. But some cool like stuff that you can do to manipulate the top card of your deck is like in response to something, you can brainstorm and put a card from your hand on top of your deck and then let the counterbalance trigger resolve and reveal it. You can plan on making sure that there are cards on top of your deck that are counterable very, very easily with like Ponder. But the coolest part about Counterbalance is like the trigger resolves and then you still have a chance to Force of Will. So like if they cast a spell that is like very good, you know, that you want to make sure it's countered and you have Counterbalance on the battlefield, Counterbalance trigger resolves, like if it counters it, dope. If it doesn't, then we still have an opportunity to Daze or Force of Will or do what we need to do. So it's really, really solid. Again, you want to bring Counterbalance in against decks that play a lot of 1-mana spells that you care about. Force of Negation is kind of Force of Will 5 and 6. You side it in against decks that are playing non-creature spells that win them the game. When it's like really worth it to have a lot of cards in our deck that even though we're 2-for-1ing ourselves with Force of Will and Force of Negation effects, when they have spells that, non-creature spells that are going to win the game, it's like worth it. So these are like mostly combo decks or things like that. Surgical Extraction is for this graveyard hate, especially free graveyard hate. Being able to pay 2 life instead of 1 black is extremely good, right? We've established that with Snuff Out, Daze, Force of Will, etc., etc. Playing 4 Power Blast. These are for blue decks, right? Counter destroy permanents that are blue. Playing 2 Unchained Berserker, which is a 1/1 protection from white. Unchained Berserker gets +2/+0 as long as it's attacking. We're playing this for the white initiative matchup. Being able to play this card, even if we don't answer the initiative threat with Snuff Out or whatever, being able to play Unchained Berserker and then be able to just like keep taking back initiative can really win us the game and give us that tempo. I mean, it's a 2-mana 3-power creature. And in Further, if we're able to take initiative from them, Unchained Berserker can block White Plume Adventurer. It can't block the other one because it can give it protection from creatures when it attacks, but it can block White Plume Adventurer. Blood Moon are for these lands matters decks. Like, it's pretty solid against lands. It's really solid against like a lot of like multiple color decks that don't play a lot of basics. But really, we're bringing in Blood Moon against decks that are playing lands that we actually care about. Meltdown for these artifact matchups, especially these matchups like these prison decks or whatnot. And then Grafdigger's Cage is like further graveyard hate, further like it's like Court of Calling hate, really good dredge hate, etc., etc. So there you have blue-red, but also black Delver in Legacy. And honestly, how it's evolved to attempt to a beat. If you liked videos like this, if you want to see more deck techs and sideboard guides and strategy content, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social media. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.